On this episode of the Layover Live, Briley Peters stops by to talk travel intent indicators. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 155 of the Layover Live, where we bring you the top article from the Layover each week. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights, and welcome to the show. So happy to have you here. You may have noticed we've kind of moved to a bi-weekly cadence, which I think is good, as all of us were kind of inundated with a bunch of webinars and shows and everything else throughout the pandemic. But now that things are starting to move in more of a positive direction, we're going to move to more of a bi-weekly cadence moving forward. So good there. Speaking of good things in travel, that's why we're here to talk about today. So we've seen some recent traveler sentiment from our friends at Destination Analyst and at Longwoods International, which is showing that travel intent indicators are indeed surging right now, which is great news. Destination Analyst has been reporting that for weeks now. Sentiment is really increasingly confident across the board. And even at Longwoods, they reported that 81% of travelers are planning to book a trip within the next 6 months. Now, this brings us to our article of the week this week, which comes from NBCnews.com, where it talks about the travel industry really gearing up for a rebound in bookings. And to talk about that very topic is our very own Briley Peters, who is the Senior Account Director of Book Direct. So, Briley, so happy to have you on the show, and welcome.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I finally get you on, which is great. You always have so much great knowledge you share with all of us, and now we get to share it with everybody else too, right?
Cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, great. So let's just jump right into it because, again, we talked about some of these indicators moving in a positive direction. And I know you've got such a great handle on some of this with Book Direct, and you're keeping an eye on these kind of travel intent indicators as they relate to bookings. And so, maybe kind of looking back at maybe this past 12 months, I know we're kind of coming out to this kind of like anniversary that nobody loves about the pandemic. But how has the last 12 months maybe looked for hotels and bookings from your perspective?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's been a year already. I looked at the calendar, and this is week 52 of being at the home office. So definitely ready to get back to work and back to the office and seeing you guys in person. But I remember this time going into 2020, everybody was excited. They've all had their events and everything planned out, and everybody was looking forward to kind of beating those 2019 numbers. And everything changed everywhere overnight. So just crazy to kind of think about. From a product level, it's actually quite interesting. Our total referrals were actually higher in 2020 than they were in 2019. The one little exception is from that kind of March to mid-May timeline where, everybody was locked down and nobody was doing anything. So once we got out of that, kind of into the summer season, all the referrals they went crazy. And just a reminder, Book Direct, we are a referral engine, which means we send qualified leads or referrals from the DMO site to lodging properties being listed. So it's not actual bookings that we're tracking here, but again, it's that qualified lead that we track. So as we're seeing this develop and we're seeing referrals sort of increase on a whole, we started paying kind of a lot of attention to the why and how of why that was. And just like with a lot of things, it was almost an 80-20 rule where our highest performing clients created a majority of those referrals. For example, our top performer in 2020 went from sending 750,000 referrals in 2019 to around 1.25 million referrals in 2020.
Wow.
So just diving in and kind of looking at all of those top performers, there's definitely a destination type that sticks out. Most of them have access to a national park or other notable outdoor recreational opportunities like lakes, rivers, mountains, beaches. And they also all have a similar type of lodging inventory available in that they offer short-term rental options to provide more of a secluded or private option to their travelers. Interestingly enough, I attended the fifth short-term rental summit late last year. And some of the notable takeaways from that, from Expedia, was that whole home rentals won 2020. And then the Verbo Trend Report talks about the road trip experience, and that 61% of US families said they're more likely to visit an outdoorsy destination than an urban one. So these types of destinations soared, while other destinations who don't necessarily fit the description, their numbers fell way below, or well below, 2019 numbers. And they're only just starting to see kind of small upward ticks. So, and then just to kind of finish this out, another trend, and I know Bill from Go Breck brought this up, but we did see that extended summer season, or summer peak season. It extended past Labor Day where it normally cuts off. So the idea of the staycation, flexcation, whatever you want to call it, that allowed people to travel, further into the fall.
Yeah, Briley, great information, taking that look in that rearview mirror. Really great insights. Again, I think probably a big surprise for a lot of folks out there that you mentioned was that, hey, we saw kind of this referral traffic up, which is pretty crazy, but it could be that the space was so dynamic and fluid and moving, right, that people were kind of coming in and out. They didn't know if they were going to take a trip or not take a trip, and so they were kind of dipping their toe in the water. But that's really, really, really amazing stuff. So now that because of that, right, and because the space has been so crazy, as everybody knows, this has caused many, many DMOs out there to have to kind of like pivot and change a little bit. I think, agile is kind of the new buzzword that's going around. So how have DMOs and maybe hoteliers that you've talked to and seen really changed or pivoted their strategy during this time to maybe start attracting some more of those visitors to their properties, to their hotel properties?
Sure. So a lot of what I was hearing is that these destinations had to sort of balance the idea of continuing to market the destination, fill hotel rooms, but they had to do it in a way that was responsible and making sure that their locals were on board and comfortable. So a lot of the marketing efforts have been focused more towards those locals. And, again, the idea of the staycation, we're going to give you guys access to having this experience in town where you get out of the house and, kind of, use your own facilities here. So we worked with several destinations on promoting local campaigns and also doing some updates to their listings to focus and showcase safety protocols that they were doing within the destination, all focused on providing those potential visitors assurance that safety is top of mind. I know we did a blog late last year about privacy becoming a popular amenity. And so we've somehow incorporated that into several different sites, whether it's using the cutie little mask emoji or, anything kind of like that. So we've also worked with destinations on promoting packages being offered to these drive markets. And we've also heard a lot about destinations doing sort of buy now, stay later campaigns.
Yeah, very cool. And I know you guys had done some of that. I think maybe was it Boulder, Colorado? Maybe it was an example of that, and where you guys worked with them. So good stuff there. But yeah, you're right. I think it's kind of looking at how things are moving. A lot of clients were like really focusing on a lot of this drive market or staycation type focus. And I probably imagine that in many ways, even as we're starting to get back to travel, right, and we're just easing back into it, you can kind of feel it in the air. That staycation or that drive campaign focus or whatnot is probably still going to be, really probably the main mode or the main way that people are going to experience travel, probably at least in the beginning, I should say, because I think, unless you're hopping maybe back onto an airplane to see your friends and your relatives that you haven't seen for like a long time, you'll probably start to see demand for air travel return a little bit slower. But I think definitely people being more open to these staycation type campaigns are probably something that's going to continue, I'd imagine, even through the summer this year. Okay, so now that's a really good way to kind of show that kind of where we're at. But now I'm going to ask you, Briley, to kind of maybe look into the crystal ball a little bit, right? This is always the hard thing to have to do is talk about what the future may hold for us, because it's a challenge. We know that very much 2021 is going to be this kind of transitional year, which we expect, right? But I think it's important from your perspective because you guys have such an ear to like this referral traffic and whatnot, and you guys are really experts in that space. So maybe what does the future look like, from where you're sitting for the lodging industry? Talk maybe a little bit about what you're seeing on that side of the house.
Sure. And, Jason, I've heard you talk about these phased approaches in the recovery, and how, when we get to a different phase, the strategy changes. So many destinations I've heard are thinking in the same way. Everything's slowly opening back up. So they're expanding those marketing efforts from locals to extending those drive markets, and then drive markets to whatever their normal domestic markets might be. And then, as in the article that we're using for this, it's eventually extending to those international markets. So obviously everybody's keeping an eye on cases in these target markets, and then also keeping an eye on vaccine rollouts. And so really those are the two indicators of sort of these market segments opening back up. And just as you said, and we've been talking about, leisure traveler has really been it. So once the meetings and group segments start traveling again, and I think we're seeing that leads are being generated for group travel finally start ticking up a little bit, we'll continue to create more buzz around the hotel stays in more of these areas, urban areas, places outside of national parks, and all boats will start to rise. So I know in my case, we've been doing a lot of products. We've been spending money on the house, that sort of thing. But I think people are ready to get back to spending money on experiences. And so things are going to continue to grow just because, everything is kind of opening back up and everybody wants to get out there. And then again, just as you said, the idea of the road trip, the flexications, the staycations, people can work from everywhere now that they're remote. And I don't think that trend is going to slow down. People had a good time and they're going to continue to hit the road and do those more local experiences that are within reach.
Yeah, great stuff. And I think, again, your crystal ball, it seems a lot more clear than mine. So, that's great. I think, listen, you make some good points there. I could not agree with you more on, as I already mentioned, on the staycation side of things. You are seeing up again things trending in a positive direction on the leisure and corporate side, but they're going to be on different tracks, right? You're going to see faster return naturally on the leisure side versus business travel. Business travel is probably going to be more of a, hey, do I really have to take this trip? Do I really need to do it? And that's how it's going to be for at least for a little while. But we are going to see meetings return. If anybody has sat in a Zoom meeting over the course of this pandemic and doesn't think that we are going to get back into in-person meetings, you're crazy, right? In my opinion, because I think we have shown the importance of meeting in person and networking and communicating. And although virtual visits have helped to bridge that gap or create a connection or a bond for us while we've been away, it is not going to replace those in-person events. I just can't see it happening, but it's going to happen at a different pace. Meetings data, again, and group data is starting, we're expecting, I think I've even heard Adam Sachs say some things about some of the data he's looking at, talking to like Shimo and other folks that are in that space and are the experts in that space, are expecting more of a Q3, Q4 type rebound on that stuff. Very similar to what we're seeing on leisure. It'll just be at a different pace. Okay, so now moving into the last question that we ask every guest that's come on the show during the pandemic, right, is for advice. And I think, again, one of the best things about this industry that I've enjoyed is that everybody is so willing to share and help each other out. And so any advice maybe that you'd like to share for DMOs out there, Briley, while we have you?
Sure, and it's more of just a continuation of what we've been doing, but the booking engine, quote unquote, and tools like Book Direct are often have conversion related KPIs. For Book Direct, there's always a lot of focus on the actual referral, but throughout this pandemic, those haven't existed or existed in kind of the quantities that destinations have wanted. So, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. It doesn't mean that they're not catching relevant information. I know here at SimpleView, we've done so much work in providing information on a global perspective about booking behavior and sentiment. Questions like how far out are people looking to book? Where are they looking from? How long do they want to stay? And I worked with several destinations kind of individually, as I know you guys have, on how these destinations can find that data on their own sites and use that information to focus in on marketing campaigns and sort of coordinate those efforts. So I'd urge everyone to maybe consider the background data and not just those typical KPI indicators to kind of see what's going on in the destination.
Yeah, good stuff, right? And I think it's really important. These indicators are so important to show how travel demand is returning and what's happening in this space. And we're starting to see that demand come back. Even if you look at some recent numbers, I think I saw an article from Think with Google, which talked about, starting to see that return for demand, right? With those indicators, things like keywords related to like travel to or resorts near me. Okay, those are all positive sentiment type numbers. So I think you're spot on with that. And then looking at those insights, really like how far people are looking out to book and things like that. I think Paul had shared recently in a webinar him and I did for a conference where we're starting to see those booking windows start to look a lot like they did before the pandemic, right? I think right now we're getting close to that 90-day out or close to that, if I'm not mistaken, which then puts us into people starting to look at summertime, starts to put us in that June timeframe for right now. So again, if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking about getting those awareness type campaigns out there about your destination, keeping in mind you have to have that sentiment and that communication open with your stakeholders and your community to make sure it's the right time to do those things. This is probably the time we should start considering turning the faucet back on. All the indicators are starting to show that, and the space is going to get really crowded really, really quickly. So, Briley, we took probably too long to have you come on the show, but I'm so happy to have you here. This is really, really great information, and I thank you for coming on and sharing that with everyone this week.
Of course. Thank you so much.
You bet. And thanks for tuning in to all of you each and every week or bi-weekly now as we're moving to a different cadence. We really enjoy having you here. If you're not subscribed, please do so now so you can stay on top of all the new findings that we come out as it relates to digital marketing. We're also available on Spotify and iTunes if you want to consume us through podcasts. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time and have a great day.